Some witches are up to no good around Easter and St. George's. They mount striga horses, fly naked to their sabbaths, and battle for the harvest. They steal the prosperity of neighbors' fields. They slip into bars to steal cow's milk, or send their Spiriduși and Milk-Hares to carry out the deed. And they do it all for the mana. My name is Radiana, and I shall guide you on a journey into Romanian folk magic, where mana is at its most vulnerable during this liminal time. Mana is one of the most widespread and fundamental ideas in magical thinking. It has different names and nuanced interpretations across cultures, yet always refers to the same immanent supernatural force that permeates people, animals, plants, objects, places, activities, and events. It can bring fortune or disaster depending on how it is handled, and it is believed to flow through the world, concentrated in certain beings or things more than others. In some traditions, mana can be accumulated, preserved, transferred, stolen, or lost, often through ritual magic. Throughout the South Pacific, especially in the Polynesian and Melanesian cultures, mana means force or special power, which manifests through remarkable effects, such as a tree that produces abundant fruit, a weapon that strikes down many enemies, or a man who is lucky in hunting or fishing. Variations of this concept, sometimes seen as an impersonal force, other times as a sacred or divine presence, appear in almost every culture, from primitive and ancient folk traditions to major religions. In North America, it is named Orenda by the Huron, Wakanda by the Dakota, and Manitui by the Ojibwe. It also appears as Kami in Japan, Brahman in ancient India, Barka in Islamic tradition, and many other forms. Some scholars consider mana as the most elementary form of religious thought, independent of animistic beliefs, even a sort of pre-animism. Others view it as a derivative of totemism connected to the notion of the sacred. In his study of Melanesian culture, Codrington explained that for the people, mana is an immaterial force, in a certain sense supernatural, but one that manifests through physical power or any form of power and superiority possessed by a person. It is not fixed to a specific object and can be found in anything. Elsewhere, he added, mana is the active element in everything that people do and in everything they believe they can do within the framework of magic. Thanks to this power, people can control and direct the forces of nature. They can make it rain or bring good weather, cure or cause illness, predict the future, bring happiness or misfortune. From this belief derives everything known as magic and sorcery. Mana does not belong to a special class of magicians. Rather, every person of a certain rank comes into contact with mana and practices some occult rites. Other scholars argue that mana is an independent, transmissible, and contagious substance that can only be handled by those who possess mana themselves and only through special rituals, likewise called mana. Thus, mana is at once a quality, a substance, and an action, and not always an abstract concept. It can be heard and seen as it emanates from the objects in which it resides, making noise in the leaves and departing in the form of clouds or flames. Mana can reside in a stone that ensures a good taro harvest, a plant that brings rain, a sorcerer or healer, or the spirit of an ancestor known for great deeds. There is, therefore, an infinite variety of mana, and its different manifestations are simply a single unifixed force merely spread among beings, whether human or spiritual, objects or events. Mana is what gives value to things and people, the force par excellence, the true efficacy of things, or more aptly put, the inherent quality of every being. Because of this quality, nets catch fish, canoes float on the sea, fields yield crops, healers cure diseases, and arrows kill. In the Dakota tribe, Wakanda encompasses everything that is mysterious, secret power, and divinity. All life is Wakanda. Likewise, anything that manifests power, whether active like the winds and gathering clouds, or passive and resistant like a roadside rock. Through this mysterious power, all things are interconnected, the visible and the invisible, the dead and the living, and the fragment and the whole. For the Hurons, all gods, spirits, humans, and animals are endowed with Orenda. Natural phenomena, like storms, are caused by the Orenda of the spirits of this phenomena. Orenda is also distinct from the things to which it is attached to such an extent that it can be emanated and thrown. The storm-making spirit casts forth its Orenda represented by clouds. Orenda is also the sound emitted by things. Animals that cry out, birds that sing, trees that make noise, and the wind that blows all express their Orenda. Likewise, the voice of a sorcerer is Orenda. Although the fundamental idea of this magical force exists universally, variations of its forms, uses, and meanings increase with cultural distance. Consider, for example, the difference between the magical meaning of mana among the Melanesians and the subtle metaphysical meaning of Brahman in ancient India. Yet both reveal the same eternal human aspiration, the desire to find the mysterious force that allows one to escape the narrow confines in which they are trapped, in search of either perfect wisdom or absolute power. This search is by no means limited to South Pacific, North American, and Asian traditions. In Europe, folk magic traditions not only preserve mana rituals, but in some cases retain the very concept itself. The word mana was likely introduced into European literature through biblical texts, providing a universal term for an already universal concept pre-existing in European folk magic traditions. In Exodus 17, it is said that the Israelites were sustained by manna in the Arabian desert for 40 years. This manna fell from the sky along with the night's dew. The Israelites collected it the next day, each gathering an omer per person. It resembled coriander seeds, was white, and had the taste of a honey-flavored cake. Elsewhere, the Bible describes it as something small like grains, fine like frost on the ground. One theory suggests that the biblical manna was actually the small coriander-like grains produced by alhagi shrubs, which are likewise called manna in Arabic. Although this tree grows abundantly in the Sinai desert, it only produces these grains for a few months each year, so if the Israelites had manna year-round, its constant supply would have been considered a miracle. Another theory is that the biblical manna refers to the slenderleaf ice plant, whose seeds are harvested by Arabs and used to make flour and bread, similarly to how the Israelites were said to gather it, grind it in a mill or crush it in a mortar, boil it in a pot, and make it into cakes. The Israelites may have used the term manna to describe various types of food from Arabia, and the word itself was likely borrowed from either Egyptian or Arabic. However, its primary origin can be traced to the earliest dispersal of Indo-Europeans to East Asia. But regardless of the source of borrowing, manna refers to preparation and nourishment in a broad sense, and this meaning has also been preserved in European folklore and magical beliefs of Indo-European origin. In the biblical account, each person was allowed to gather an omer of manna. Some collected more, others less, but when measured, everyone had exactly enough. No one lacked and nothing was left over. If mana was kept overnight, it would spoil, but on the sixth day they gathered twice as much for the Sabbath, and in this case it remained fresh. To preserve a reminder for future generations, Moses even instructed Aaron to place an omer of manna before the Ark of the Covenant. Thus, manna fell according to supernatural laws. The prescribed quantity was gathered automatically, and it could only be preserved by divine will. Later, biblical commentaries added that it had all the sweetness according to one's taste, or contained every delight suited to every taste. This led the author of a Romanian chronicle to write, "And they began to eat manna, and whatever one's heart desired, that is what it became in their mouth, bread, meat, chicken, fish, honey. Whatever they wanted to eat or drink, that is what it became in their mouth." The way biblical manna was interpreted in European folk traditions led to numerous uses of the word, most of them associated with food or the secretion or seeds of various plants used in food or medicine. Although the word manna is not attested in Greco-Roman antiquity, or at least it is not recorded in major dictionaries, the concept did exist, as attested by the presence of sorcerers who operated in the same way as manna witches in Romanian folklore, and who bore nearly identical names, Bascanoi and Strix, which gave the Romanian forms Bosorcăi and Strigoi. The legendary Telchinis of Greece were considered by Strabo and other authors to be sorcerers or bascanoi who stole the yield of animals, dried up plants, and impoverished the land. Similarly, Thessaly and to some extent Arcadia, according to Plato, Plutarch, Ovid, Theocritus, and others, were renowned for such sorcerers. Hippocrates also wrote about people who claimed to have the power to bring down the moon, darken the sun, cause storms or rain, clear the sky, produce droughts, render fields or the sea barren, and perform many other wonders. As for the Romans, their laws of the 12 tables punished with death anyone who cast spells to steal or destroy another's crops. Classical Latin authors also mentioned rural sorcerers who prevented the flocks and fields of enemies from bearing fruit, or who transferred the yield of one field to a neighboring one. These themes remain strong in both Romanian and European folklore today. Among the Romanians of Macedonia, it is believed that on the eve of St. George's Day, witches walk barefoot through open spaces, holding a green bowl in one hand with a nettle leaf inside, which they use to sprinkle bewitched water on cows, thus stealing their milk. A similar belief from Auvergne in France claims that certain people have the power to draw milk from others' cows in their own home. To do this, they must enter the barn and ritually steal the cow. From that moment on, its owners can no longer milk it, as the milk goes to the person with a special power to attract it. Among the South and North Slavs, which is called Voroski, spread salt on the path where cattle return from the fields to steal their milk or increase their own cow's milk. Among the Germans, on Walpurgis night, before sunrise, women go out and collect dew from the wheat stalks, then return home in silence without looking around and wash the cow's head with it to protect against spells and ensure abundant milk. In the British Isles, it was believed that certain women could slip into someone's cowshed, cast a spell, and make the milk leave their neighbors' cows and flow to their own. And in Scandinavian folklore, witches were said to steal cow's milk around Easter with the help of supernatural minions, often in the form of hares. These few examples suggest a common magical framework around the concept of mana shared by European cultures from ancient times to the present. And Romanian folk tradition in particular preserves many such beliefs and rituals from ancient fertility and vegetation cults. The first recorded mention of mana in Romanian literature appears to be in the Govora Codex of 1640, where the canon regarding mana witches read, Whoever takes the mana of wheat or anything else from it, this one, behold, knows the work of the devil. If they abandon these practices, they must perform penance for 4 years with 100 prostrations per day. Romanian legal literature is filled with articles concerning witches. However, jurists believe that this literature contains absolutely no provision derived from local customs, but rather consists of simple translations and adaptations from Byzantine codes. Furthermore, the legal provisions regarding mana can be traced in Roman legislation from the laws of the 12 Tables to the Code of Theodosius. The citation from the Govora Codex is considered particularly important because it uses the word mana rather than the Slavic rod, which would have been a better translation of the Latin fruges found in Byzantine law. This indicates that mana, in its magical sense, was well known among Romanians and that mana witches were numerous enough, according to popular belief, that the legislators of the time found it necessary to retain this provision from the Byzantine code. Furthermore, witchcraft trials, though not as numerous as in the Catholic West, were conducted in Romania, particularly in Transylvania, until the late 18th century, sometimes resulting in far harsher sentences than those prescribed by the Codex. Notable records from that time include the story of Mrs. Zuch, a noblewoman who was tried for witchcraft in 1717 in Salonta. Despite her wealth and social status, Mrs. Zuch's neighbors believed her success came from using magic, claiming she could bewitch cows during milking with a special grease. One witness even recalled hearing that Mrs. Zuch would grind a cow's caul, mix it with bran, and feed it back to the cows to make their milk richer and more buttery. The practice was otherwise common in the region, and it was believed to help preserve and even increase the mana of milk. Folklorist Gheorghe Pavelescu noted that most meanings of mana in Romanian have a distinctly magical character, representing remnants of a primitive belief system. In Romanian tradition, whose agricultural and pastoral practices are inherently magical, the most widespread magical meaning of mana refers to the quality of a food substance, particularly wheat and milk, seen across Indo-European tradition as the essence of life and blessings of the gods. In its primitive sense, mana means the inherent efficacy of things, their essential quality. Thus, for a people of farmers and shepherds, mana naturally came to mean an exceptional quality of wheat and milk, or, by extension, the fertility of the land and livestock as seen in expression like the mana of wheat, the mana of crops, the mana of the field, the mana of pastures, and the mana of the land. As for the mana of milk, the term universally carries the same meaning, as seen in expressions like mana is the strength of milk, the best part of milk is mana, and mana is the essence of milk. In Maramureș, this is expressed as the fullness and sweetness of milk. Without mana, milk diminishes, turns bluish, becomes watery, and loses its nutritional value. Hence the saying, it is just water, it has lost its mana. However, wheat and milk, although predominant, are not the only substances believed to contain mana, as many other elements and beings are said to contain mana that can be extracted through magic rituals for fertility and productivity. In folk magic, witches believed to manipulate mana are said to take the mind and strength of the oxen, the wool of sheep, the fat of pigs, the voice of dogs, the eggs from hens, the burning of fire, the essence of flowers, the rain, the prosperity of the plough, the power of weapons, the fertility of women, the fortune of households, the success of work, the mana and fortune of men, the strength and courage of warriors, the sleep of children, the dreams of girls, the luck of young men, the milk of women, the power and beauty of women, and the mana from all that is good. Similar beliefs applied to hunting, fishing, and mining, where mana represented the vital essence and efficacy that could be either stolen or preserved through ritual. But given the fundamental importance of agriculture and herding in Romanian tradition, most magical practices revolved around increasing or preserving the mana of wheat and milk. To ensure abundance and preserve the mana of fields, animals, and households, people perform sacred rituals, especially around the spring equinox, which is considered the most powerful time for fertility and renewal, as it marks the beginning of new agrarian and pastoral cycles. Between Easter and St. George's Day, which is also believed to be the time when witches steal mana, the year's most important rituals are performed to preserve and increase the mana of wheat, milk, and the land. The first sowings are blessed with holy water, and seeds are often mixed with crumbs of Easter bread and crushed eggshells to strengthen their fertility. On St. George's Day, the morning dew, which holds the season's vitality, is gathered for beauty and health rituals. Willow branches are placed in the furrows for growth and protection against spells and misfortune, and barren fruit trees are awakened by drilling small holes into their trunks. The same care is shown to animals, especially milk-producing ones, whose mana must be guarded from harmful forces. Shepherds, farmers, and beekeepers observe strict rituals of purity during this time, believing that moral and physical cleanliness directly affect the fertility and health of their flocks, herds, and hives. Hunting and fishing rituals follow the same logic. At Easter, fishermen tie pieces of consecrated bread to traps and rods or cast them into rivers, trusting the sacred offering will ensure a good catch. Hunters may even attend the resurrection service, and when the priest exclaims, "Christ is risen," they intently reply, "Yes, I shoot, I catch fish, I milk cows." Whether for fields, flocks, forests, or waters, springtime, and especially St. George's rites, of which there are many, reveal the fundamental belief that through sacred rituals, the mana of life can be renewed, protected, and carried into the new season. Since the earliest days of herding and animal domestication, milk has been regarded as an elixir of life, believed to contain all nourishing principles needed for survival. As such, in Romanian and other European traditions, mana and milk have long been seen as one and the same, and so they are often used interchangeably. In traditional folk belief, the mana of milk refers to its goodness, its essence, its butter, and the irreplaceable qualities that make it so valuable to humans. It is something unseen yet vital. When the mana is lost, the milk is believed to lose its value, and it can even become harmful. If the milk suddenly drops for no reason, if it smells sour, if the foam forms only a thin layer and spreads unusually, or if the cow refuses to be milked, people say the mana has been stolen. To test it, the milk is offered to a cat. If the cat won't touch it, the milk is considered unfit for human consumption. As the old saying warns, what the cat won't eat, the man should not put on his tongue. These signs were often seen as proof that harmful magic had been at work, usually at the hands of a witch. To guard against this, the household and the farmyard were adorned with ritual tools and talismans believed to have protective powers. Likewise, knives, sickles, axes, brooms, and even horse harnesses and shoes were all used in rituals meant to block or undo the effects of witchcraft. Some would also bury a special Easter egg in the yard, or place red eggshells in the barn to prevent witches from approaching. Others would even avoid naming their cows, for if a witch found out their name, they could use it to call to the animal and steal its milk. Rituals and beliefs for preserving or protecting the mana of milk are among the most widespread in Romanian folk tradition, making up more than 80% of all practices related to mana. There is hardly a moment or task involving milk that isn't marked by some ritual meant to secure or strengthen its vital force. Certain times, however, are seen as especially critical, when the risk of mana being stolen by witches or lost through carelessness is at its highest. One of these is the cow's first calving, and the other is St. George's Night. All measures against mana witches and strigoi are intensified on the eve of St. George's. It is believed that on this night, witches have maximum power to take the mana of wheat, but especially of milk, because this is the time when the mana is purest. Now, the St. George celebrated by the Church is not quite the same as the St. George in folk tradition. Saint George, or St. George, as he is called in Transylvania and Banat, comes from Zeus Gheorghe, meaning Zeus the husbandman or farmer, an aspect of the Greek deity who was worshipped as a god of farmland and crops, and whose festival was observed at the time of plowing and sowing. He has been locally conflated with the Thracian horseman, a vegetation god and protector of horses, cattle, and the fertile fields. These pre-Christian vegetation cults explain why St. George presides over the cycles of farming and herding, and why his feast day on April 23rd marks the beginning of the agrarian and pastoral season. Because of this fundamental connection to fertility, growth, and the life force of the land, the night before St. George is seen as the most active and dangerous time for mana rituals. Witches and strigoi are believed to cast their spells and charms to steal the mana from cattle, crops, and people, and across Romania, each region preserves its own set of rituals for this night. In Bukovina, protective symbols are drawn on doors, thresholds, windows, and even on the cow's horns and hips using incense or shepherd's grease mixed with garlic. These marks are meant to shield the household and animals from strigoi and witches who might steal their strength or milk. In Banat, an ointment is prepared from pig fat mixed with willow leaves, garlic, lovage, wormwood, cuckoo's milk, birch, burdock, and other herbs, and is used to anoint and smoke the cattle to protect them from spirits and from losing their milk when crossing water. In Maramureș, shepherds mark the cowshed and sheepfold with crosses made from lovage and garlic, and pass the animals over them, believing this will guard them against wild beasts and witches. In every region, plants like lovage, palwort, garlic, wild thyme, elder, and others are gathered under strict ritual conditions and used to bless the cattle, decorate the house, or mix into the animal salt to ensure their health and fertility for the season. To prevent witches from entering the barn at night, people place scythes, sickles, iron tools, thorn branches, or linden twigs at the doors. Cows and oxen are adorned with willow and linden branches to guard their milk and strength, and homes and cattle pens are decorated with protective herbs including garlic and wormwood. A widespread belief is that the dew of St. George's Day has miraculous properties. It is thus collected before sunrise and sprinkled on houses, stables, and fields to bring prosperity. People also wash their faces with it for health and fortune throughout the year, and the cattle are sometimes let out to graze at night to feed on the dew-covered grass and increase their mana. All festivities on the night of St. George have an inherent magical function. People spend the night singing, shouting, and blowing horns or whistles, as it is believed the sound drives away strigoi and witches. People also light ritual bonfires, known as living fires, through friction without flint or matches. The cattle and sheep are led through the smoke, and shepherds leap over the flames, cleansing both themselves and their flock from harmful influences. The fire must burn continuously until the sheep return from the mountains, and no one is allowed to borrow from it, as its primary purpose is to preserve the mana. Mana can be taken or stolen through milking only by witches or women skilled in magical arts. Milking was considered one of the most important tasks for women, and it has a strong connection to ancient myths. In old beliefs, witches were thought to be able to milk the clouds, drawing rain from them, much like how they would draw milk from a cow. When a storm came, they would milk the clouds so intensely that not only milk but blood would flow from them. In some villages, it is said that witches chase the moon into a barn and milk cows under its light. A similar belief among the Bulgarians is that witches can take the moon from the sky, causing lunar eclipses, and turn it into a cow. Then they milk it, and the butter they get from it is believed to have magical healing powers for wounds that cannot be cured in any other way. In Romanian tradition, the witch who takes the mana of wheat, for example, is said to go out naked on St. George's night and collect dew from neighbors' fields using a magic scarf, a tablecloth, or a blanket. When collecting the dew, the witch says, "I do not gather dew from the sky, but mana from the field." She then gently touches her own field with the collected dew or transfers it into a vessel to sprinkle it across the land as she chants her blessings. In Olt and Dolj counties, it is believed that the naked witch rides a rolling pin with a hat on her head, a jug around her neck, and a stone in her hand. She collects dew from the field, cuckoo milk, and bladderwort. She throws the stone, saying, "Stone, mottled stone, be good for gathering and take the mana and prosperity of the field." When collecting the herbs, she says, "I gather cuckoo milk to take the mana and prosperity of the field. Bladderwort, bladderwort, from all a little." The same ritual can also be used for taking the mana of milk. In Muntenia, women prepare in advance a few fertilized eggs, a rolling pin, a rein, a whip, a red thread, a pouch with basil, wax, and butter. Around midnight on St. George's, they go to a field where they bury 2 eggs for good luck, tie the pouch to their right leg, plant the rolling pin in the ground, unbraid their hair, undress to the waist, then mount the rolling pin and, whipping it, run along the field, saying, "From Old John's field to mine," 12 times. Then they turn toward the east and say, "The wealth of the field, the prosperity of the harvest, the crop of the wheat, let it go, let it pass, let it gather in one heap in the market field, from the field to the pile, from the pile to the pit." After speaking these words, they again ride the rolling pin and repeat 12 times "From Old John's field to mine" and the previous verses until they have said them 3 times. Then they leave the field, cover the rolling pin, and hide it in their own field. Finally, they return home without speaking to anyone. Some rituals for taking the mana of fields can also be used for taking the mana of milk. However, the simplest way for a witch to do the latter is to go to the cowshed of the animal whose strength or milk she wishes to take. The witch usually goes naked and carries a vessel, often a new pot. As she sits on a rolling pin, she milks a little from the cow while reciting her charms. Some witches don't even need to milk the cow. They simply touch its udder with a hazel stick or a small pouch, saying, "I draw the milk meant for me, and even the milk left behind will find its way to me, for this is my will and the will of all masters above and below. Stay well, for the milk will come to me and flow into the others as I wish." Once the spell is spoken, they return home unseen and begin milking their own cow, which will now produce the stolen milk. Other witches overturn stones at dawn in a stream the cows cross, believing this too will draw the milk. Yet others take hair from a cow's udder or straw from the bedding, which they later feed to their own cow to bind the mana. Borrowed fire from the household, however, is the most potent. When the witch returns home, she extinguishes the borrowed fire, saves the coals, and gathers more from 7 other houses. On the night of St. George's, she lights the coals in a clay shard, sits naked on a rolling pin with her hair loose, and smokes her cowshed, whispering, "As I have gathered these coals, so let the milk gather in my cows." However, the most widespread ritual for taking the mana of cows is collecting dew on St. George's night, using either a strainer, milk jug, sieve, new pot, small pouch, ritual cloth or white fabric, or a broom and a bundle of basil. The witch goes out barefoot, naked, with her hair loose, and a strainer tied to the big toe of her left foot, or with rags on her feet, and gathers the dew, saying, "I do not gather dew, I gather milk from the cows of so-and-so," or "I do not take dew and earth, I take milk and butter." She then squeezes the collected dew into a vessel and gives it to the cows in water or bran. Or she wets the cows' udders and backs with the dew, saying, "To me enough milk, to the neighbor none." In some regions, it is believed that there are witches who, if they do not have a cow, steal milk from other cows and put it in a sow or even in a wooden cow that they keep in the attic and from which they milk. To do this, they take 12 strands of hair from a milking cow and put them on the head of the wooden cow. They circle it 3 times and begin to milk, saying, "Hey, Florica, I've come to milk you." Most witches can only take the mana of milk by having close contact with the cow. They steal the milk itself and often leave the cow dry. However, some witches can steal the milk from a distance or even leave the milk behind and only take its mana. The latter are those generally referred to as Strigoi or Strigoi. It is enough for them to only cast their gaze upon a cow and think ill of it, or even dote on it, much like an evil eye charm. It is also widely believed that witches can transform into animals, ranging from wild foxes and hares to domesticated calves, cats, and dogs when stealing the mana of milk. Many villagers tell stories of catching such witches in the act, either milking the cows out in the meadows, riding the animals as if they were mounts, or working charms during secret rituals. When caught, they were often beaten and taken to the local police. Some were released, but only after promising to return the stolen milk or reveal the charms and practices that could protect a herd's mana. Others were less fortunate and faced court fines for their craft. When a cow's mana has been stolen, the animal becomes restless, cries constantly, and often wanders to the gate of the person believed to have taken its mana. There it bellows so loudly it is painful to hear, and refuses to leave until someone brings it home. Despite proper feeding, the cow weakens and grows thinner. It will not recognize its calf, refuse to let it suckle, and the owner is often unable to milk it. The little milk that does remain turns watery, bluish, or reddish, and sometimes disappears entirely. The cream grows thin and brittle, and the butter, once rich and yellow, becomes pale and tasteless. When these signs appear, the people act quickly, turning to rituals or witches and wise women to recover the lost mana. One of the most trusted methods is an inversion ritual by recovering something from the cow where the mana was transferred, either a tuft of hay from its manger or a piece of salt, and feeding it to the afflicted cow to break the spell. In some regions, at sunrise on a Sunday, while the priest blesses milk in church, the owner pours milk into a strainer and beats it with hazel rods and nettles at the doorstep, chanting, "I am not beating the strainer, I am beating the one who took the mana from my cow. May their hearts sting until the milk returns." Sometimes the cow is milked over a bucket with a red-hot iron, horseshoe, or blade inside, saying, "I do not burn the milk, I burn the heart of the one who stole the mana." A more dramatic version of this can be found in Maramureș, where the cow is milked over a living trout caught fresh from a spring and placed in the milk bucket. If the fish thrashes during milking, it is said that the thief is struggling too. The owner must quickly pray for the cow, lest the thief die and the cow's fate remain sealed. Other remedies involve milking through a naturally perforated adder stone, placing milk on the doorstep and striking it with an axe, or pouring milk upstream into a spring, then collecting it downstream to feed or wash the cow while praying for the milk to return. Nearly all these practices are performed alongside spoken charms. One notable charm tells how the mana was stolen by the Queen of Fairies, locked away in a hidden pantry, and encircled by barrels, until St. George sounded his trumpet, shattered the barrels, and freed the mana, which rushed back to the cows. The most elaborate rituals are preserved by experienced women who are often called when ordinary remedies fail. Yet even when the charm is spoken by someone else, the cow's owner must observe ritual rules, walking home in silence, not looking back, turning clothing inside out, planting a knife in the threshold, blessing the feed, and more. More experienced witches need only strike the milk, and people say you can hear the striga crying out and begging to be forgiven so she can return the milk. When the mana is thought to have been trapped, locked in barns, sealed in pots, or hidden behind doors, it is called back through incantations which demand every lock be broken, every barrier undone, so the mana can return fast as the wind and silent as the earth, unhindered by valley or fence, raft or bridge. A milk-calling charm from Hatzeg reads, "Let it come without delay, for we are longing and we are in haste. Let the true milk and pure butter come. If it has been taken across seas, across villages, over waters, over mountains, let it come soon on the scent of the wind, on the fragrance of flowers. Let it come, true milk and pure butter. Let it come without delay, for we are longing and we are in haste." Folk wisdom also warns that neglecting the rituals for preserving mana may cause it to be lost when a cow crosses a bridge, walks through water, grazes certain grasses, or drinks from streams. Even breaking green leaves or encountering other calves might cause the mana to slip away. The most widespread term for a mana witch is strigoi, or its feminine forms, striga, strigoi, or strigoica, all rooted in the Latin strix. This term and its many variations are predominantly used in Transylvania and Bukovina. While one meaning of the word refers to revenant witches and evil spirits, it also encompasses witches in a broader sense, including werewolf magicians like the Pricolich and weather magicians like the Solomonari, who can likewise manipulate mana. Another term commonly used for mana witches, especially in the areas of Bihor and Maramuresh, is bosorkoi, which is rooted in the Greek baskanoi and is cognate with the Hungarian boszorkány. A witch's mastery of mana is fated from birth. In some cases, midwives recognize newborns destined to become witches by a tail, a call, or a mark on the head, and thus predict what kind of strigoi the child would become, either a strigoi of milk, of fish, of broom, of spade, and of wolves, among others. Yet beyond taking mana, they also command a vast arsenal of powers. They can drive away rain clouds, summon drought, steal dew from the grass, bring hail upon a rival's field, silence the ringing of church bells, or even cause the stars themselves to fall. Some whisper charms into the yokes of oxen, while others slip unseen into barns and by morning leave the milk pails dry. Between Easter and the Feast of St. George, they are set to battle devils to protect their lands so people can wander freely all night without fear. Their power is said to be so formidable that both God and the devil fear them. One legend from Bukovina tells how, on Ascension Day, Christ himself could not rise into heaven until the Strigoi witches gathered in the skies and granted him passage. Especially on the night of St. George, they are said to take flight on striga horses, often made from enchanted household items such as brooms, rolling pins, forks, and even unfortunate men who wandered outside in the dark without a hat on. Others ascend into the skies by rubbing their bodies with a special ointment that renders them weightless and allows them to slip up through chimneys and vanish into the night. Thus they gather at crossroads, border stones, or the liminal spaces between villages and countries. Here they fight for the harvest and rain, and the strongest witch takes the mana of the fields from the weaker and becomes the queen of witches until the following year. According to some beliefs, it is not the witch's body that travels through the night air, but only her spirit, which sometimes may take animal form, while the body remains lying cold and still at home. If someone were to turn the body, such as placing the feet where the head should rest, the spirit would lose its way, and the witch would never return to life. The same would happen if her spirit in animal form were to be killed. Witches can often assume animal forms, either cat, dog, fox, hare, bird, snake, and thus sleep unnoticed into barns where they suck the milk directly from cows. Once home, they return to human form and pour the stolen milk into a vessel. The milk is then mixed with bran, breadcrumbs, incense, and holy water and fed to their own cow to secure its strength. It is said that in Arad County, a striga was shot whilst in dog form by her own son for this act. Other beliefs hold that a witch only transforms into an animal to hide her identity if caught or pursued by the cow's owner. If the man lands a blow on the creature, the striga will fall ill the following day. To unmask a striga, some people harvest garlic on St. George's Day, which they've ritually planted beforehand. It is believed that tucking a leaf into one's hat or belt would grant them the power of true sight. If they hide and observe the herds being driven from the village, they will be able to see the Strigoi riding upon the cows. Their mistress will be the one riding the bull, which she may cast upon him if he is spotted. A similar belief in Bukovina says that if one climbs a tree on St. George's Day carrying such garlic, the witches will be compelled to gather beneath and worship them. And in Transylvania, it is further believed that those who possess this garlic not only gain the power to see witches and their deeds, but also receive the ability to hear the grass grow, to understand the language of all living creatures, and even to locate treasures hidden beneath the earth. On that note, a particularly vivid story tells of a man who once witnessed a witch stealing mana. To mock her, he exposed himself and said, "Take the mana from here." From that moment on, a white, milky fluid began to flow ceaselessly from him, and it did not stop until the following St. George's Day, a full year later. Folklore offers many versions of the same account, warning against the powers of mana witches and the intrusion into the sacred time of the ritual. It is widely believed that a woman who has stolen mana in her lifetime will not decay after death. It is likewise believed that the souls of witches linger as Strigoi spirits long after death, especially in communities plagued by sudden epidemics. When a known witch, or even someone suspected of mana theft, passed away, elaborate precautions were taken to prevent them from returning as a dead Strigoi. Their hearts were pierced, their bodies were bound with thread, and if these rituals were neglected, their corpses were later exhumed and executed. While witches themselves are believed to shapeshift, slipping unseen into barns and pastures in the form of crows, snakes, cats, dogs, or even strange objects like cartwheels or little lights rolling through the fields, the Spiriduși could do the same. Many stories tell of a black animal with glowing eyes seen lurking in the herd. Sometimes it was the witch herself, and other times it was the Spiriduși acting in her stead. The word Spiriduși refers to a domestic spirit, often a witch's familiar or devilish imp. It comes from the Thracian sparadokos, meaning great spirit or spirit of abundance, and the Latin spiritus, meaning spirit. True to its name, the Spiriduși increases the wealth and prosperity of its master. It can carry out all manner of tasks, from luring lovers, healing sickness, attracting money, drawing the mana from cattle, or even conjuring milk from an empty cart. The bond between witch and Spiriduși is forged through ritual, and it is said to be unbreakable even after death. On Easter, the witch hatches her Spiriduși from an egg, which was cradled close against her body for 9 or 40 days before the night of the resurrection. At midnight, as the church bells ring and the faithful proclaim, "Christ is risen," the witch whispers to herself, "Mine is risen too," and the Spiriduși hatches from the egg. Once born, the creature serves her faithfully, taking any form she requires, though most often it chooses the shape of a bird, cat, dog, toad, snake, or even a hare. However, the true form of a Spiriduși is unknown, and its shape-shifting ability seems to have no limits. It can move objects without being seen and slip through the tiniest cracks and keyholes. In this way, it carries out the witch's errands, especially the secret theft of milk and the gathering of mana, which it would return to its mistress. Similar beliefs have been recorded much further north, in Sweden, where witches were said to employ a magical creature called a bjora, trollcat, or milk hare for the same purpose. In the Torsaker witch trials of 1674, a woman named Elizabeth was accused of using a bjora, a woolly ball made from 9 different colors of yarn, carefully crafted over 3 consecutive Thursdays. Into the hollow center of this ball, the witch placed a sacramental wafer or another enchanted object, along with 3 drops of blood from her left little finger. The bjora was then brought to life with the words, "I have given you blood, the devil will give you courage. You shall run the earth for me, and I will burn in hell for you." Once animated, the bjora would slip through even the smallest crack in a farmhouse to steal milk, cream, butter, or cheese from neighboring herds. When the task was done, it returned to the witch and vomited the stolen milk like a pellet for her use. In southern Sweden, the milk hare was understood to be the same creature as the bjora, although described in slightly different terms. Witches would steal milk by driving a knife into the roof beam of their house and milking the handle, or, if they preferred to avoid the trouble, they would send out their milk hares to suck the cows dry and return to spit the milk into their dish. These milk hares were said to be created from a few wooden pegs and a stocking leg. The witch would pour a drop of stolen milk into the stocking, command it to gather more, and send it on its way. As told in one account, Magnus Tilda's mother was certainly an Easter hag she was, and she had 2 milk hares, a big one and a little one. People said she had made them out of knitting needles and heddle whites and rags. They would milk other people's cows and then run home and spit up the milk. She had a kettle in the barn, and every morning it was full. Another similar creature is the tilbury in Icelandic folklore, and throughout northern and central Europe, variations of such magical milk thieves remain strikingly consistent. In both Christian and older pre-Christian thought, this is a time of rebirth and renewal, not only for souls, but also for the earth and its creatures. It is the beginning of the agricultural year in Romanian tradition, when herds return to pasture, fields are blessed, and households perform rituals for fertility and protection. Mana, the vital essence believed to give milk its richness and animals their strength, is seen as especially vulnerable during this window in spring, when nature is awakening, herds are calving, and the success of the coming season still hangs in the balance. The myriad of folk magic beliefs and rituals meant to preserve or transfer mana during this liminal time are remnants of long-forgotten fertility and vegetation cults that survive in agricultural traditions and which, across Europe, reflect an old truth, that when life is most abundant, it is also most easily taken or lost. Until next time, remember, the hand that takes must learn to give.